The war in Afghanistan has seemingly come to an end, or has it? I have in front of me an article from Reuters that details the following. The title of the article is Last U.S. Troops Depart Afghanistan After Massive Airlift Ending America's Longest War. And the first part of that, the first part of the title of the article, I think, is the most important. The fact that there are no more troops left in Afghanistan. I will expand on that point in just a minute, but I'll be very brief here in reading a little bit of the article. So it goes off. The United States on Monday completed its military withdrawal from Afghanistan after a huge but chaotic airlift that cost the lives of 13 U.S. troops and left behind thousands of Afghans and hundreds of Americans still seeking an escape from Taliban rule. In a first in nearly 20 years since Al-Qaeda's September 11, 2001 attacks plunged the United States into war, not a single service member from the U.S. military was in Afghanistan, the Pentagon said in an afternoon conference. The article goes on, more than 122,000 people have been flown out of Kabul since August 14th. Think about it. How many times have mainstream media stated that fact? How many times have they stated that fact? Probably none. As the U.S. troops departed, they destroyed more than 70 aircraft, dozens of armored vehicles, and disabled air defenses that had thwarted an attempted Islamic State rocket attack on the eve of the U.S. departure. Having failed to anticipate the Taliban would prevail so quickly, Washington and its NATO allies were forced into a hasty exit, leaving behind thousands of Afghans who helped them and may have qualified for evacuation, and others who feel at risk. Now, that's pretty much all I'll read. Well, I'll give you this fact. So nearly 2,500 Americans have been killed in the conflict. That's over the course of the 20 years, including the 13 troops in a suicide bombing by the ISIS terrorists last week outside the airport in Kabul. So this is really good. This is really good development. Now, so I said in the beginning, the war ended, or has it? And there's some legitimacy to that statement. So if you remember Mr. Biden's remarks in response to the Kabul bombing, he, grandstanded and he puffed his chest out and he was very tough and strong. And yeah, we're gonna strike back on these terrorists that killed our troops. We will hunt you down, he said, and we will find you. And he made it a really big deal. And he seemingly made right on those promises, those threats. Very recently, there was a drone strike. I believe there was a bombing in Kabul, and this bombing was supposedly aimed to strike the enemies of America, the people that had caused that bombing in the Kabul airport. As reports say from the intelligence agency. But we got word that that strike did much more than it was apparently intended to. Now, the Pentagon, they're not going to tell you this, but the people on the ground, the civilians, the reporters there, we get this knowledge from them. Apparently, that strike killed many civilians, including at least 7 children. Yeah, that's the type of revenge that America gets. Yeah, let's go kill children in response to what happened outside of that Kabul airport that day. And notice how all the people that are calling for Biden to be impeached over his Afghanistan withdrawal have nothing to say about the lack of care and just the throwing away of, just the needlessly killing of innocent civilians and individuals, right? And they're calling it, it's like a revenge strike or whatever. And who knows how many more of these attacks are, set to happen. That is why I say that, these attacks persist. If we have a drone presence like we do in Northern Africa currently, if we're currently bombing, through whatever technological means, whether it be, through aircrafts, fighter jets, through, drones, or whatever the case may be, then the war has not truly ended. But what we can successfully say is that there are no more troops on the ground in Afghanistan. And that is amazing. And in that sense, yes, the war has been ended. Now, allow me to elaborate a bit further. So when the terrorist strike happened in Kabul outside of the airport, we got reports from BBC, among others, that a lot of the carnage that occurred against the Afghan civilians was not the fault of the terrorist bombing. American soldiers, in panic and in response to the bombing, basically just sprayed and prayed and just unleashed on the people in the surrounding areas, and that attributed to a large portion of the murders of the Afghan civilians. They even got some Taliban personnel, and so mainstream media isn't telling you that either. It's especially tragic that these 13 American soldiers had to lose their life. Of course it is. That's extremely saddening to hear, and I am very sorry that had to happen. But mainstream media, they'll put all their focus on that, and they'll put all the blame on Biden, right? When in fact, first of all, withdrawing is in its merit the right thing to do. But going about doing so, I don't see why anybody ever thought this would be a very, very smooth process with no types of fuck-ups whatsoever. Because, see, the reason that they're blowing this out of proportion, any type of minor problem, now, that terrorist bombing is no minor problem, but, I mean, anything that goes any kind of hourly with this evacuation, they're going to blow it up because they don't want to evacuate anyway, that being corporate media, that being the neocons and the warmongers and our institutions, right? So they're going to blow up any kind of mishaps because they don't want to evacuate anyway. But Biden went ahead with it, and the troops have now successfully evacuated over 122,000 people. They got out of there. And of course, instead of acknowledging that, they're going to acknowledge, the leaving or abandonment, as they like to refer to it as, of, many Afghans that had, visas and a right to evacuate. And I feel for those people. I truly do. And the many others that could have possibly come. But this is a situation that we're faced with. And I feel like, you just play the hand that you're dealt. And that's what they're currently doing. It's not perfect. Of course, it's not. I don't think it ever could have been perfect, no matter what. But there are no more troops on the ground in Afghanistan, and I do believe that's a thing to rejoice in, and that's a thing to be happy about. But on regards to the other meaningless wars that we're fighting, it seems like with all of the critique and just vitriol that Biden has accumulated over the course of this evacuation, he's not going to end another war. I'll just go ahead and say it. He's not going to end another war. He's not going to pull the troops out of Syria or out of Iraq. Those two places specifically, we've gotten a little bit of development on, and he's not planning to do so. And not only do I think it's because he's, a warmonger by nature, but it's also the response that he's gotten, from pulling troops out of Afghanistan. Nobody's really on his side. He got abandoned even by his allies, and that's a very, very, very bad thing. The Justice Democrats, none of them really stood out and said anything except for Ilhan Omar, and she was very tepid. Nobody really came to Biden's defense. And when you do this, you make it less likely that he does these types of things in the future. But as I stated before, it's more than accurate to say that the war is ended in the sense that there are no more troops on the ground. Let's hope that we don't see any more drone strikes that kill kids and innocent civilians. I expect this to be used as ammo against the Democrats, against Joe Biden, by the Republicans, and by anybody that disfavors them. They'll bring up this. And this is still popular among the American people, withdrawing from Afghanistan. Of course, corporate media has propagated them so much that, everybody's now some kind of specialist. And, it should have went this way or that way. When honestly, I'm kind of numb to it all at this point. I'm just glad that the troops are coming home finally. Or maybe not coming home. Where are they going to be deployed next, I think, should be the question we should be asking. We just got to keep the fire on these people and keep advocating for a non-imperialist government that hopefully we can receive sooner, much rather than later.